Hey, welcome back to Miss Maddie's studio. I'm Maddie, and today is the fifth and final chapter read from my book, The Things That Haunt Me. Today's chapter is called That's Not a Fox. And I want to give a quick warning about today's story. It is on the scarier and gorier side, and we'll mention an indigenous beast that starts with the letter S or W, depending on the tribe. As an indigenous woman, I don't say its name, but it rhymes with Skin Parker. Ew. It felt wrong even to say that. Today's art is a fan art of Nightmare Before Christmas. It is Jack and Sally dancing on the hill. It's done in acrylic paint and done on Bristol board. I hope that you enjoyed listening to my spooky story times. I've really enjoyed telling some of my scary stories to all of you. Now, let's get the lights and start the last spooky story time. I saw so many amazing and enchanting things in those woods behind my grandmother's house, but I also saw one of the most terrifying things there. Something that was so horrible and so chilling that it changed the way I viewed the forest forever. I still love the woods, and take every chance I can to be in them, but now I always look over my shoulder. I listen to the sounds carried on the winds, listening for that far-off crunch that led me to that beast. Sometimes, the sound of breaking branches reminds me of it and sends a chill down my spine. It sends me straight back to that horrible day, right back to when I saw whatever that creature was. That day started out horribly. There was a huge fight in the morning that had spilled over from the night before. I was not doing as good in school as they wanted, and that was what the fight was about. I remember being asked why I couldn't just do better, what my problem was, and why wouldn't I just hand in the papers that I completed. I couldn't really give them an answer at the time, but now I understand that I am autistic with ADHD and dysgraphia, which of course made school very difficult. My mom drove us to our grandmother's house in an angry silence, sometimes chiming in with little quips of blaming me for the fighting and wishing I would just act right. I sat silently and watched the trees go by, speckled with houses, some far apart and others right next to each other. It was a bright sunny day with only some light wispy clouds floating aimlessly through the sky. I thought it would be a really nice day to go into the woods. I thought about asking my grandmother for permission, which I did a lot of the time. Sometimes she would say yes, and other times she would say no, but I would go anyway. She was so inconsistent with everything. You could ask her the same thing 2 times and she would give you 2 completely different answers. When we got there, I remember Mom telling my grandmother that she was sick of the way I behaved, and she didn't know what to do with me. It hurt to hear, but at that point I was used to my family not knowing what to do with me, and using me as the family scapegoat. But I was also the family therapist, so it was hard for me. Sometimes the adults didn't want to hear me speak. Other times they came to me with all their problems and would ask me to talk it out with them. I knew today was a day where no one wanted to hear me talk. I could tell from the way my grandmother was glaring at me that she wouldn't let me go exploring today. So I waited for my mom to leave, and then I did. I didn't wait to hear what bullshit she was going to say to me. I wasn't about to stay there and wait until she started telling me how horrible I was and how I just needed to stop being a selfish brat, or wait for her to try to swing at me. I don't think I even waited for my mom to fully be out of the driveway before I took off. I ran as fast as I could across the driveway, past the outbuildings and through the field. I didn't stop until I was at the edge of the woods. I stopped to catch my breath and looked back across the land towards my grandmother's house. It really was beautiful land, even with the different states of the buildings and tractors that dappled the landscape. I turned my back on the scene and thought about the mission at hand, finding a sign of the Black Spirit Fox or the Fae. I wandered into the edge of the woods, taking note of every footprint and little piece of evidence that I could see of animal activity. I noticed the chipmunks that were already getting ready for winter's harsh conditions. I saw them darting back and forth across the forest floor, some with acorns in their mouths, and others that were trying to steal those acorns. I watched a pair of them run up a tree before they fought briefly. The bigger one won, as usual in the wild, and the little one ran off to find a new acorn. I noticed all of the birds flittering around the trees, chatting with each other as they searched for food and companionship. Some of them still had nests with fledglings in them, ready to leave the nest but still staying in the safety of their home. I continued wandering around the forest, following a faint trail of footprints that looked dog-like. They looked too big to be a fox's print, but prints in the dirt tend to get larger in mud, so it was the best lead I had. It led me deep, deep into the woods, deeper than I had ever gone before. I went past fields of deer who were peacefully eating and drinking from a small stream. There were a few babies, but they were almost grown, just like the birds in the nests. I went past where the stream cut through the forest and took a little break there to play in the water. I took note of all of the tiny fish, frogs, salamanders, and crayfish I found. I even caught and released a few of them, unable to stop myself from giving them a little pet. When I started searching again, I noticed that the sun had started to get low in the sky. The sun streamed across the trees in deep yellow ribbons. Even though this was the time when the crickets and toads were usually singing, the forest was eerily quiet. No little critters running and scurrying through the underbrush or trees, no birds chittering, getting ready for their sleep. The only noise was my feet crunching dried leaves and sticks. It was a stark difference from the peaceful and calm noises of the forest I had sworn I was just listening to moments ago. I looked around the forest floor and in the trees, trying to find answers to why it was so silent. I strained to see if I could hear anything, and then far off in the distance, I heard crunching. It seemed to be coming from the other side of a hill. I snuck up the hill, wondering if I would see a deer eating the bark from a tree. I was thinking of how cute it would be to see a deer and a yearling nibbling the tree bark together. When I reached the top of the hill, I was not prepared for what I would see. The first thing I noticed was the smell. My nose was overwhelmed with the smell of rusty iron. It was so thick in the air that I felt like I was going to gag. That was when I saw the blood. So much blood. A large pool of deep red that was soaking into the ground. I couldn't comprehend what could cause that much blood. I had seen blood before, but only in a scrape, worse, a cut or a bloody nose. There is something sinister about a large pool of blood. You know pain and misery has happened, something horrible. That feeling is palpable. It taints the air and pierces into you. Your skin prickles with hairs standing on end. A lump will fill your throat, unable to be swallowed away. The air feels wet and cold on your skin. Your stomach heaves with nausea and unease. Your body tenses, ready for fight or flight. Your whole body is on high alert, trying to figure out if there is still danger, and if what happened to that thing could happen to you. I searched the pool of blood until a deer face came into view. It was obviously dead. Its cheek and one eye were missing, seemingly ripped away in one swipe. The deer's tongue lay in the blood, its face frozen in a final scream. Either terror or anguish, maybe both. As I looked over the rest of the deer, my eyes ran into a strange foot standing in the blood. It looked like a fox foot, but it looked wrong. Like it was stretched out, stretched past its limits, and starting to come apart. I quickly looked over the beast. It was a fox, but much larger. Its skin was, well, it didn't fit right. It looked like something wearing a fox skin. There were spots where the skin was too tight and ripped, exposing blood and muscle underneath. Other spots were loose and hanging in an odd and grotesque way. It was hard to look at this beast. I remember gagging, not only on its appearance but also on its odor. I had smelled bear's breath and thought that was the worst smell in the world until that day. This thing smelled of rotting flesh and evil, like it had been decaying for decades while piling more flesh on top, so there were varying levels of decay and smells. Decay mixed with fresh blood, the smells were too much. Crunch. The sound made me look at the beast's face for the first time. I gasped. The skin on its face was torn, laid over exposed bone and bits of rotting muscle. Its whole jaw was exposed bone. Its teeth were jagged, sharp, and there were far too many. Crunch. I watched as this thing took a bite out of a large bone it was holding. That's when I noticed its strange, human-like hands with long fingers and a thumb, all of which ended in sharp-looking claws. Crunch. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It looked like something out of a horror movie, or maybe something that inspired an old mythos or legend. It was terrifying, but I was frozen there, stuck on top of that hill, watching this horrifying creature eat its latest victim, wondering if I might be its next. Snap. What was that? My eyes burned from holding them open for so long, so I blinked away the tears and then refocused on the beast. It was staring at me. I stepped back, wondering what my chances would be if I ran. I was never very fast, and my ankles tended to roll. We stared at each other for what felt like forever, but then it slowly turned its head back to its kill. I waited to watch and make sure it was eating. After another eternity, I was finally able to run. I ran as fast as I could through the woods, through the field, across the path, over the bridge, and back into my grandmother's house. I slammed the door closed, leaning my back against it, hoping that my weight would hold that beast back. I held my breath and waited to see if it decided to follow me, but thankfully it didn't. I didn't realize that tears were running down my cheeks until Sadie asked me what was wrong. I couldn't tell her. I didn't even really know what the hell I saw. I felt in my soul that that thing was evil, pure, unfiltered evil. I was terrified. I had seen bad things before, but that was something hellish, something demonic. I was deeply Christian at the time and was concerned that I was being punished somehow, warned that as someone queer, I would be met with such beasts in hell. Thankfully, I'm over such delusions now. Okay, that was the last chapter read from my book, The Things That Haunt Me, and the last of this year's spooky storytime videos. I hope that you all enjoyed hearing my ghost stories, and if you are interested in more of my writing, The Things That Haunt Me will be available soon. Today's artwork was really hard for me. I've drawn Jack and Sally a few times, but this time just had so much more pressure on it. I felt like I had to be perfect because I was sharing it with all of you, which is silly. I should have just let myself have more fun. Unfortunately, the end of October is also a very hard time for my family. We lost a beloved family member way too young, about 6 years ago, and it just makes this month really hard. But I really hope that you enjoyed today's video and today's story. We are just about done. Jack is pretty much the last of the painting that I do for this, because Sally was the one that I was most freaked out about, but luckily for me, I have a Jack and a Sally doll right across from me as I was painting this, and that really saved my ass when I was doing Sally's dress, because it's a little bit of a weird angle. It's profile, so you don't see the same thing in that dress that you typically see. Alright, the video is about to be over, so thank you for joining me, and if you want to support me more, I have a Patreon, TeePublic, and a website, all of which are in links in my bio. Please like, subscribe, and comment for the algorithm. It really does help. I hope to see you next time. Happy Halloween. Bye.